Hello everyone. Welcome to this video series on Introduction to CAD using Fusion 360. If you're able to follow the instructions in the assignment, you should have created an Autodesk account and downloaded the software. If you had any trouble with these first two steps, please contact your teaching fellow or instructor and they should be able to help you out. Once you've downloaded the software, open it up and log in with the account credentials that you made. Once you do so, you should see a screen that looks kind of like this. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the basics of the interface, what all the major components are, and we're going to go ahead and generate two very basic designs so you guys can get a basic understanding of what this software can do before we jump into creating the parts necessary for the assignment. To help you out along this tutorial, I've downloaded a piece of software that allows you to see what mouse clicks I'm doing and any modifiers that I'm holding down when I'm moving around in the software. So anytime I left click, you'll see a red ring. Anytime I right click, you'll see a blue ring. Anytime I middle click, you'll see a green ring. Also, when I double click, you'll see kind of a two rings of red. And anytime I hold down a modifier key like Control or Shift, you'll see that as well. So walking through the interface, the first thing here is the data panel. So you hit this little grid icon and you'll see the workspace that you're in. You can see all your different projects that you're working on. Currently we're just in the default project, and as you create more projects or more parts and assemblies, you'll see those show up here. You can also add more people to your project. So if you want to share a design with a friend or a teammate, you can do so, and since Fusion 360 is all cloud-based, you don't need to actually send them any files. You just send them a link to the project, and they'll be able to have all the up-to-date parts and assemblies. So go ahead and click the grid panel to hide that, so you've got a little more space to work with. Directly below that, you've got your Workspace tab, and what this will do is it'll change the workspace that you're currently in. So a lot of the extra functionality of Fusion 360 is contained in this by changing your workspace. So the one that we're going to be in for the vast majority of this tutorial is the design workspace. This is where you're going to mostly build your parts and assemblies, but there are several other different workspaces. If you're more curious about what these other workspaces do, there are tons of great tutorials online that can kind of give you a better explanation. Also, if you ever hover over a certain tab, it'll give you a real quick one-sentence explanation of what that does. So once you've got a basic idea of how this software works, go ahead and check out these different workspaces and see what they do. To the right of the Workspace tab, you'll see four different tab menus as well. And these are the first two are two different types of modeling techniques. The first is solid modeling. That's what the majority of what we're going to be doing. And then there's also surface modeling, sheet metal, and then tools are a couple other additional functionalities hidden in that menu as well. Like I said, just like we're going to be in the design tab, we're also going to mostly stay in the solid tab up here as well. Directly below that, you've got your browser. So this will show, if you're in assembly, it'll show all the different parts. If you're in a part, you can see any different bodies that you have. You can see any construction planes or axes. Every part starts out with the origin, which is a point, 3 axes, and 3 planes. You can also have additional views if you'd like to save a view, and you can have any additional document settings as well. And you can see here the default in Fusion 360 is for the units to be millimeters, but you can change that to be inches if you'd like. All right, on the right over here, you'll see the navigation cube. The navigation cube allows you to manipulate your part in 3 dimensions. You can also snap to a specific view, like the right face, or an isometric view from the top right, or even a corner like this. So that can be really helpful, especially if you're new to navigating in 3D space. It can be really nice to just click on the face that you want to see. At the very bottom here, you'll see the timeline. This will fill up as we create new features. So basically any features that we create will show up here on the timeline, and you can walk through all the different features of creating your part and edit an old feature without having to completely restart the part. Okay, so now that you've got a basic tour of the interface, let's go ahead and create our first part. So to do that, we're going to create a sketch. And what a sketch is, it's basically a 2D representation of what we'd like to bring into a third dimension. So the first part that we're going to make is a rectangular prism. So create a sketch. The first thing you have to do when you create a sketch is select the plane or face that you want it to start on. So you can see here the first, there are three options that pop up, and these are the planes from the origin over here, the XY, XZ, and YZ plane, also known as the top, front, and right planes. So we're going to start with the top plane, and when you select that plane, it'll jump into a overhead view of that face so that you've got a nice clean environment to work on, so it's in 2D. So to make the rectangular prism, we're going to start by creating a rectangle, but instead of doing the two-point rectangle, what we're going to do is instead click this drop down, and this gives you a bunch of more options. And we're going to hover over rectangle and select center rectangle. So two-point rectangle allows you to define the two edges of a rectangle. Center rectangle allows you to find the center and one of the edges. So once you've clicked on that, so rectangle, center rectangle, left click once on the origin, drag out, and then left click again to finish. So now you'll see this is kind of shaded light blue. That means it's a closed profile. And you could go ahead and start the extrusion now to bring it in 3 dimensions. But before we do that, we want to add some dimensions. So if you hit escape, you'll see I'm no longer in the rectangles tool. And you can see right now the lines are light blue. And what that means is that they're not fully constrained. If I click and drag one, you can see that the rectangle changes size, which that is not what we want. We want this to be defined by dimensions or constraints. So let's start off with a dimension. So use the dimension tool up here. Click on the top line. Click once, drag, and then click again to finish. And let's make this 50 millimeters. So you can grab one edge to select to give a dimension, or you can select 2 edges like this. We want to dimension between the top and bottom. We want this to be 40 millimeters. Press enter after you've entered the dimension. Okay, so now you can see we've got a 40 millimeter by 50 millimeter rectangle, and it's all the lines are now black, which means that they're fully constrained and I can no longer drag them. Okay, so now we can go ahead and finish the sketch. It'll pop us back into a 3D view, and to bring this into the 3rd dimension, we're going to use the Extrude Tool. So the Extrude Tool takes a profile and basically extrudes it normal to that sketch plane. So you can see on the right hand side here, you've got a bunch of different options for how this extrude works. So the first option is the profile. So if I unselect that, as you hover over a closed profile, you can select it. If your sketch has multiple profiles, you can either select all of them or some of them, and you can do so by hitting Shift. You can select multiple profiles. So the start of the extrude right now is currently the profile plane. So that's the top plane, but you could change that to be an offset or from a different object. But right now we're going to keep it on profile plane. You can see the direction. There's 3 options. There's one side, 2 sides, or symmetric. So one side is the current option. We're just extruding 40 millimeters up from the plane that we started on. You can see I can also do a symmetric, and this will do 40 millimeters in both directions, or I can do 2 sides where I can change, go 25 millimeters down and 40 millimeters up, or whatever numbers we wanted. So let's go back to one side because that's what we want for right now. And I can change the distance either in this toolbar here or over on the right. And the last, or second to last option is the taper angle. If you wanted to create some draft on the part, you could do so by using this tool or just by entering in a degree here, but right now we want it to be at 0 degrees. And the last option here is whether we want to create a new body, if we want to join this feature with an existing body, we want to cut through an existing body, intersect, or create a new component. Right now we're going to select new body, and I can go into a little bit more about how those all work in future videos. So once you've got the distance you want, which right now we're going to do 40 millimeters, hit OK. And you can see now that we've got a 3D view. To orbit around that view, you can see I'm holding down middle click and shift. Oh, sorry, just hold middle click and shift, and then you can orbit around. And if you just click middle click, then you can pan. Then use the scroll wheel, and you can zoom in and out on the part. So there's our rectangular prism. Very simple. So we can go ahead and save this. So you can either hit the save icon up here or just Control S, and we're just going to call this rectangular prism. Save it in our default project. And you can see right now that's version 0. Anytime I make a change to this part and save it, it'll change that version. Oh, sorry, version 1. Anytime I make a change to this part and save it, it'll create a new version, and I can step back and look at any old versions. They're all saved in this part. If I click the data panel now again, you can see my rectangular prism part shows up here. Okay, so we're going to create one more part before we end this video, and that is going to be a sphere. So to create the sphere, instead of using the extrude command like we did for the rectangular prism, we're instead going to be using the revolve. And what the revolve does is takes a 2D sketch and revolves it around a given axis. So in this, to make a sphere, the profile that we want to revolve is a semicircle. So that will be more clear as we continue. So again, we're going to start with a sketch. And this time, instead of doing the top face, we're going to use the right face. And we need to make a semicircle. So to make a semicircle, we start with a full circle. So hit the center and diameter circle here. Left click once on the origin, drag out, and left click again to finish the circle. Then hit the dimension tool. We're going to dimension it to be 50 millimeters. If you'd like, you can also dimension using a radius by clicking here, and then before you finish the dimension, right-clicking, and you can see you can select either diameter or radius. So we can do a 25 millimeter radius. To make this into a semicircle, we need to split it with a line. So the line tool is here. So we're going to start from the top edge and go down, and you can see this automatically creates a vertical constraint on this line, which means that it will remain vertical. But we want this to also be coincident with the center point or the origin. To do that, we're going to use the coincident constraint, which is right here. So select that constraint, select the line, and then the origin, and that will create the coincident constraint. So this is now black, and I can no longer move that line. So to create just the semicircle that we want, we're then going to use the trim tool. The trim tool is located right here, so it's the pair of scissors, and we can either click on the extra line that we don't want, or we can drag it across the line to remove it. So you can see now that the semicircle has been created, and all our lines are black, which means it's fully constrained. So we can go ahead and finish the sketch. So to create the sphere, we're then going to be using the revolve command. So the profile is automatically selected, so we need to select the axis. Like I said before, the origin contains 3 different axes, the X, Y, and Z. In this case, we're going to use the Z axis, and we're going to do a full 360-degree angle, and that should create a sphere. If I change the angle, you can kind of see this is now a semisphere. and I could change the direction as well to be the other way. I could do a 3/4 sphere by doing 270. I'm sorry, 270. Let's see what that looks like, but let's just change it back to 360 degrees. So that's defining the angle of the revolve. You can also change it to be just a full revolve, which is what this is essentially. It's just the full 360 degrees. Or you could have it stop at a specific face or body. Okay, so we're just going to make it full, again, new body, and hit OK. So you can see this is our sphere. One thing to mention as well, now that we've made a few features, they show up in the timeline down here. And so say we wanted to change the radius of our sphere, we can right-click on this sketch here, and then edit sketch, and double-click on our 25, and we can change it to 35. So our radius is now 35. Hit enter, and the extrude, or the revolve, sorry, will automatically update. So go ahead and save this part as sphere. And again, in our project, we can see our two different parts that we've created. I'm going to go ahead and end this video here with us having created the basic two parts. Thanks for watching.